Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan about A Course in Miracles. And today we thought we would talk, per Susan's suggestion, which I heartily approve, about section 10 in the Manual for Teachers, which is How is Judgment Relinquished? And I think this is a favorite of both of ours because we're just commenting before we started the recording how important it is to recognize how clueless we are as individuals about the big picture. And this potent lesson in humility certainly gives us plenty of pause and cause for reflection and a very gentle humility, and also enormous support, because we do have within each of our minds an awareness that we took with us into the dream that allows us to get back to that awareness of peace by guiding us through all the stuff that we don't know as individuals, right? Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Right. We have a part of our mind that can, our loving teacher, inner teacher, is always available to help us know, that we can take our judgments to, let's say, and look at them differently and see from a much perspective of truth, and a perspective that looks beyond the devastation of the ego thought system, that that will bring us to peace and will heal what needs healing, the mind that needs healing, and can really teach us. But we have to. What I love about this, and I was saying that to you before too, we got started, was really also just how important it is for us to admit that we're wrong. I mean, the very first step of forgiveness is admitting that we're wrong about where we're attributing the cause of whatever we're upset about. I'm not, it's lesson 5, it's some version of lesson 5. I'm not upset for the reason I think the cause. I generally start out having chosen the ego and believing that my reactions, my anger, my depression, my anxiety, my fear, my fury is a result of something that I'm seeing in my life, in the world, or in my body, something that's happening to me and has an external cause, when in fact it's an outside picture of an inward condition, which is the inward condition of having chosen to believe that we're separate from God. And once we made that idea real, which it is not, then the thought of punishment is immediately there. The thought of guilt is immediately there. And we are constantly striving to position ourselves individually as less guilty than someone else. So how do we do that? We need this constant barrage of seeming attacks and problems that come at us, right?
Exactly. The way you phrased it is interesting, because we need the barrage of attacks, and but that's really the lifeblood of the ego thought system, is in its nourishment, if you will. Pretty strange nourishment is really some kind of attack in order to justify its existence.
Right. I mean, we're really saying, hurt me, so I can show I'm innocent.
Right. We all have kind of like the Gary Larson cartoon of the deer with the bullseye birthmark, and the other deer saying, yeah, it's a bummer of a birthmark, but in a sense we all kind of want that as egos, so that we can perpetuate the grievances and the victimhood and the martyrdom in some form or another, so we can have a story that we keep perpetuating, that justifies our battles and and our crusades against whatever we think is wronging us. And I appreciate the fact that you start out with lesson 5, and we're never upset with for the reason I think. And I've been thinking about those 2 lessons that Ken Wapnick suggested. If you only remember 2, the 5 and 34, I'm never upset for the reason I think, and I could see peace instead of this. I've been thinking about how that's really lately, the first 2 steps in forgiveness, as you were pointing out. The first one, bringing it back inside, is like, it's not about anyone else, it's about my decision and my identity. that is a mistaken identity. And then the next part is I could see peace instead of this, is basically going to the mind, also with the Holy Spirit's help, and saying, oh, I've judged myself as well as everyone else wrongly, and I've misjudged myself as being this sinful, evil, guilty, fearful self that's finite and merits attack. And what we really are is, it transcends all that, but that's not our perspective. So we need Holy Spirit's help to kind of get past those misperceptions and in both of those steps. I was also thinking about how they kind of correlate to the outer and inner shields of oblivion, and also Ken Wapnick's favorite phrase of the maladaptive solution to a non-existent
Mm-hmm.
problem. The maladaptive solution being, I'm never upset for the reason I think, and the non-existent problem is that we are wanting to see war in our minds instead of the peace that's really there behind it. So
Right,
yeah,
right. And we do see it, don't we?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, everywhere there's attack. Everywhere we're in a steaming period episode in the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, we seem to have episodes, be binging through episodes, whatever this collective dream is lately. That all of them are, some sort of horror story. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're not in touch with the part of us that really, that really wants to, that's keeps going back and streaming these, there again, we're not aware that we want to be unfairly treated, um, but that's our deep unconscious wish. And how do we know that? Because that's how we feel, unfairly treated all the time. And from the course's perspective, there's nothing out there. So we are dreaming, and and although we point to what's the contents of our dream, the episodes that are, the characters in our dream, and the episodes and the situations in our dream, it's really just the idea that we're dreaming, that we keep wanting to dream and refuse to stop, refuse to awaken. That's really the problem. And so we don't know what the problem is, and so we can't relinquish judgment on our own, because we think that judgment is warranted and justified by what seems to be happening, when we're identified with the body, when we're identified with the ego. And so we have to have help from a part of our mind that does see peace instead of this, does know that there's really nothing to judge against, or there's no cause for our judgments, for our attack thoughts. And that's the part that can lead us out of this dream gently, because we are very afraid of it. But
Right.
again, the first necessary step, as this section points out so directly,
Mm-hmm.
is that we have to recognize that we don't know, we can't judge, because we really don't know what is going on. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
where we are, we don't know what we are, we don't know, we certainly don't have the bigger picture of the entire, atonement path of all of the different various lifetimes that we've had, and what really is happening, whether something is good or bad for the healing of my mind. I don't even know that. I'm concluding on such limited evidence and viewpoint. So yeah, I mean, I think we could probably just start jumping in. And
Sure, sure. Before we do it, there are a couple of things you said that kind of reminded me of a metaphor that I find really helpful. Is that we're all like little water droplets that have built tiny little walls around the droplet that we think we are, still floating in the ocean, and these walls are really holographic, illusory, imaginary, unreal walls that seem to separate everyone from everyone else, and yet they never happened. And so we've done that with both time and space. And so we think of ourselves as having these bodies that come and go, little blips on the eternal, the cosmic radar, which really have nothing to do with the eternal self that we are. And the other thing I was thinking about the judgment is, you mentioned the word attack, and I was thinking, the judgment has a lot of connotations and denotations, I suppose, but I think the one that A Course in Miracles really wants us to look at is the discomfort and the dis-ease, if you will, of the judgments that have to do with attack and condemnation. And it has nothing to do with just the common sense judgments in the sense of, saying, this plate is blue and this one's green, or those it's not that kind of a thing. It's basically, it's not saying, don't, it's not saying that we shouldn't use our common sense, or the normal use of judgment, in the sense that of um, being able to identify things and kind of navigate through the world in a normal way.
Right.
It's just basically saying, if we make our identity and our peace of mind contingent on um, anything that's happening or not happening in this world, we're using judgment inappropriately. Yeah, that's where we're using
Right.
the maladaptive, making a maladaptive solution up for a non-existent problem.
Well, and if we're using judgment, I mean, I think the overriding message of the course is if we're using judgment to make differences among people real and important, and
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
and to to use it to blame, to use it to say, again, to differentiate among who's guiltier here.
Right.
And the truth is, that the only thing that will bring us peace is to see beyond all of the, all of this hierarchy of illusions of who's guiltier and who's less guilty, which, everybody's guilty here from the or we don't come here, but we're trying to, again, make us ourselves the less guilty one. What we're really, the correction for that and the healing of that is to begin to see, with help from the perspective of our inner teacher Jesus, our sameness, and to see that really we're, no one's guilty here, and that victims and victimizers share the same interest in trying to heal their minds of the ego thought system that always wants to see one or the other, always wants to make someone else guilty, to prove that I exist, but it's not my fault, it's theirs, to try to get away with what we've accused ourselves of, which is that thought of murder, that thought of destroying love, that thought of, toppling heaven and destroying God, destroying, our home, our self.
And we think we've
So,
pulled it off, huh?
right. And
Yeah.
so that's the attack, and that's the judgment that, we're always judging, and again, trying to compare ourselves somehow to others in the best possible light, which involves us attacking them, right? And
Yeah.
perceiving them as the bad ones, as
As
and so we're
crazy as that sounds, but we all do it in ways conscious and quite a bit unconscious. I think that's why,
right,
the course emphasizes that we look without condemnation, and that the looking is really a big part of the antidote for the condemning
right.
judgments, isn't it? Yeah.
Right, to see beyond what, to see past to what we're really doing, to what's concealed beneath, and to recognize that we don't need to do it, and because there's no, there's nothing that we need to defend ourselves from. So, and again, that idea that everybody's fighting a hard battle here, that Ken always
Mhm.
quoted, is really the recognition that comes to us, that's healing, to see, well, yeah, we're acting out differently, but it's coming from the same hurt. It's coming from the same, the same self-hatred that is causing us all to act out and causing us to need others to blame. And that's the deeper problem that everybody has that comes here.
Yeah,
So
that the
seems
quote is, "Be kind, because everyone's fighting a hard battle," and that kindness is so important, isn't it?
right, and we can't
Yeah.
do that without help because we don't know
Right.
what kindness is.
Exactly.
But, without being self-serving, we don't know what it is.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good.
So,
Good point.
yep. So should we read the whole thing, or should we start?
I think it's only 6 paragraphs, so I think it would be a good
Okay.
idea. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Why don't you start?
Okay. How is judgment relinquished? This is section 10 in the Manual for Teachers of A Course in Miracles. Judgment, like other devices by which the world of illusions is maintained, is totally misunderstood by the world. It is actually confused with wisdom and substitutes for truth. As the world uses the term, an individual is capable of, quote, good, unquote, and, quote, bad, unquote, judgment. And his education aims at strengthening the former and minimizing the latter. There is, however, considerable confusion about what these categories mean. What is, quote, good, unquote, judgment to one is, quote, bad, unquote, judgment to another. Further, even the same person classifies the same action as showing, quote, good, unquote, judgment at one time and, quote, bad, unquote, judgment at another time. Nor can any consistent criteria for determining what these categories are be really taught. At any time, the student may disagree with what his would-be teacher says about them, and the teacher himself may well be inconsistent in what he believes. Quote, good, unquote, judgment in these terms does not mean anything. No more does, quote, bad, unquote. And I'm reminded of Shakespeare's cliche almost of nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Right, right. And yes, yep. And also, just that it's how subjective judgment is. It's, there really is no absolute truth or here in the world. I mean, there's no one that's not guilty again. So, because we've accused ourselves of of that separation, right? Being real, then there is no absolute um, good here.
Yeah.
Right? We're always again trying to position it as a with by comparison to something else. And every culture defines what the parameters of good and bad are. So it's a constantly shifting sort of idea. And our judicial system is, what is our judicial system about? It's about assigning guilt, right? And so again, there's no escaping the idea of guilt. It's just a matter of what will the cost be, and who's responsible, who will suffer, right? Who caused it?
And it's an ever-shifting landscape, as this paragraph points out. This
Right.
one day to the next, it's sort of like what got me to question traditional formal Christianity, if you will, is what kind of sense does it make to have a God that's wishy-washy? One moment kind and next punitive, and or the next, one day to the next, 1 hour to the next, whatever. It's like, how could there be any kind of safety or peace in that kind of inconsistency?
Right.
And yet that's the ego's God is totally that schizophrenic, flip-flopping, truly never kind, but at worst vicious, but at least suspicious, that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. We've invented a God that's that recognizes guilt,
Yeah.
finds punishment, and is as unstable as we are, only more powerful. So how scary is that to put your trust in?
Exactly. We're buying into the laws of chaos, and that everyone must sin, and truth is different for everyone, and all those kind of crazy ideas that right off the bat when we think we have some capacity to judge correctly. The other thing on that first sentence, I just was noticing two statements that it makes all right in the first sentence is not only is judgment totally misunderstood by the world, but also it's one of the devices by which the world of illusions is maintained, it says. And so we use judgment in order to continue to keep the propaganda machine going and to keep us mindless. So it's a powerful tool in the ego's arsenal weapon for mindlessness, isn't it?
And to keep yeah, to keep the idea that I exist, right? That
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
autonomous. I can function on my own and figure out what needs to happen. And yeah, exactly.
Right. I'll beat God to the punch and punish myself and be proactive
Yep.
for the crime that
Well,
I couldn't possibly commit.
hopefully
Huh?
punish them and not myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That someone else needs to pay for this mistake, which is only a mistake, but from the ego's perspective, it's a huge
Unredeemable sin. Huh? Yeah. Exactly.
unforgivable sin. There is
Yep.
no real
Yep.
forgiveness in the world.
Right.
Um, so it is necessary for the teacher of God to realize not that he should not judge, but that he cannot. Again, there's that humility, right? In giving up judgment, he is merely giving up what he did not have, which he's incapable of. He gives up an illusion, or better, he has an illusion of giving up. He has actually merely become more honest. Recognizing that judgment was always impossible for him, he no longer attempts it. This is no sacrifice. On the contrary, he puts himself in a positive where judgment through him rather than by him can occur. And this judgment is neither good nor bad. It is the only judgment there is, and it is only one. God's Son is guiltless, and sin does not exist.
That right there is a wonderful summary of the Course's get out of jail free card, isn't it?
Right, yeah. Yeah, so it's just, I have to admit, once that I admit I'm wrong, then I can be taught. When we resign as our own teacher, then we can be taught, then we can heal.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to get out of the way. And since that takes that recognition that I must be wrong, that first step of forgiveness that we were talking about. And as this is the manual for teachers, so it's talking about the process. We move up, we advance in this process, in this development of trust, and eventually realize that it's no sacrifice at all to, at first it's a real struggle to say I'm wrong, but more and more, the more we practice this, the more we realize that it's a relief to say I'm wrong, that I can't, that it's painful when I'm trying again to insist that I can understand this and I can somehow fix it and manage it and make it work, solve it. And when we finally come to the point of saying, oh, wait, I'm doing it again, right?
This isn't working. Yeah.
This isn't working. I want a better way. I want to see peace instead of this. Then we can, then we can see peace. Then we can share Jesus's perspective, but we have to open to it, and that requires that we let go of our perspective.
Exactly. Or at least be willing to question it. I think that's yeah. A lot of times if we can just get that far, then we've planted a seed of doubt for the ego's insanity, because
right.
we're recognizing that insanity is not cutting it for us.
Right. Even if we can just say, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Or I must be wrong, not fully invested in, well, I don't want to be wrong, but I must be wrong about this because I am a course student and the course is telling me I'm wrong.
If I'm not at peace, there must be something I'm missing, right? Yeah.
So it must be because I don't want to be at peace. It's not because of, no one else outside me has the power to take my peace away. That's a lie. It's always a lie. The course is perfectly consistent in that. There's no exceptions.
Not except for the reason I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many times in the given day do we thoroughly believe that at every moment? Probably, it's a gradual process, isn't it, to get to where we can recognize how many times we want to fight that and
right.
And
I mean, the more we can just do what the course is saying and then just go about our day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to have a holy instant right then. But if we can just do it and we can still be kind of carrying it around, but just, working with that, I must be wrong about this. I must have become afraid again. Then, and not judge ourselves. It just, I'm clinging to this because I'm afraid. Then, I think it hastens we let go of it more easily. It just doesn't have the power. It's disempowering the ego's, the power of the ego when we do that. The questioning, the raising to doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, that doubting is sort of like slowing down the ego's locomotive, and it's like, well, maybe we can stop shoveling coal in the engine quite so fast here.
Right. We should be getting to know our egos pretty well by now. I mean, we all share the same ego, but we have our different versions of it in our seeming different personalities. So we should, the way it presents, and so we should be pretty familiar with those voices by now, and not trust them so much.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So, you want to read the next one?
Sure. The aim of our curriculum, unlike the goal of the world's learning, is the recognition that judgment in the usual sense is impossible. This is not an opinion, but a fact. And this is one of my favorite paragraphs in the whole book, just because I need to practice it so much, and it's so potent, both in its challenge as well as the results that it's offering us. In order to judge anything rightly, one would have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, present, and to come. One would have to recognize in advance all the effects of his judgments on everyone and everything involved in them in any way. And one would have to be certain there is no distortion in his perception, so that his judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and in the future. Who is in a position to do this? Who, except in grandiose fantasies, would claim this for himself? And of course, as egos, we think nothing of that on a
Pretty
daily
grandiose.
basis, a pretty
Yeah.
regular routine basis. Yeah. But that's why we need to, have the veils lifted on the insanity of the ego, and why A Course in Miracles is such a brilliant work that positions side by side the insanity of the ego's judgments with the Holy Spirit's gentle, patient um, suggestion that maybe we could look at our wanting to judge as a way of, staying mindless and staying in our own hellish dream. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. I'm going to read the next one. Remember how many times you thought you knew all the quote facts you needed for judgment and how wrong you were? Is there anyone who has not had this experience? Would you know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? He's really messing with us, isn't he? Why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment, it is the relinquishment of judgment. Make then but one more judgment. It is this: there is someone with you whose judgment is perfect. So within you, you could say, right? He
Mhm.
does know all the facts, past, present, and to come, and he does know all the effects of his judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And he, capital H, he, is wholly fair to everyone, for there is no distortion in his perception.
And
He's just
this is
referring
our
to himself in the third person in this, right?
yeah. I was just to say this is our get out of jail free card, and the solution to the problem that has just been posed in the
Right.
previous paragraphs. Yeah.
Good news. Yeah.
Yeah, totally good news.
Good news for you.
Yeah, as you were talking about the reading that, would you know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? I was kind of picturing, a spaceship approaching, the speed of light, in some hypothetical sci-fi film, and watching the odometer numbers tick over, and just the millions of light years numbers slowly turning, but all the other digits are just whirring by so fast we can't even imagine how fast they're going. And that was kind of what the image I had of, you know, can you can you would you know how many times you merely thought you were right? Well, probably a gazillion times a second, and we just don't even, we're so oblivious to it that we just, I think that's why it's a gradual unlearning process
Oh,
and
it's
undoing
so, I mean,
process.
and I think the course really uncovers that too. Again, the
Yeah.
practice of forgiveness, because you're paying such a close attention to your reactions. You should be, right?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I have caught myself so many times, or concluding that somebody did something based on, I mean, just something that I totally misunderstood or misread, or and so it is very funny. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we really are on the lookout all the time for feeling that we're attacked, for something to project our guilt onto, right?
Right. Right. And
So
incredibly um, partial, incomplete, inconclusive, fragmentary, bogus, distorted, and compromised information, and what,
absolutely.
what passes for intelligence in the ego's courtroom. It's laughable, but we forgot to laugh. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, yep,
Should I read the next one?
sure.
Okay, number 5. Therefore, lay judgment down, not with regret, but with a sigh of gratitude. Now are you free of a burden so great that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath it. And it was all illusion, nothing more. Now can the teacher of God rise up unburdened and walk lightly on. Yet it is not only this that is his benefit. His sense of care is gone, for he has none. He has given it away along with judgment. He gave himself to him, capital H, whose judgment he has chosen now to trust instead of his own. So now we have Holy Spirit's oceanic vision instead of our tiny little droplet wannabe myopic walled off
Right.
dark seeing, as the Course would say, to rely upon. And we don't have to have the big picture. We just have to know that there is that awareness in us that does have that understanding, and to trust that. Now he makes no mistakes. His guide is sure. And where he came to judge, he comes to bless. Where now he laughs, he used to come to weep. There's that contrast side by side, the two
Right.
thought systems, one completely, as Ken Wapnick always liked to say, 100% sane, the Holy Spirit, and the ego is 100% insane. And 100% of the time, we are choosing between one of those two,
Right.
24/7, 365.
But it is such a, it's that relief that this paragraph speaks to. And,
Mm-hmm.
that idea of how much this is hurting us. The Course says,
Right.
perhaps you come in tears in the text. It's like, so it is that, I think it's in the text. But, where now we come and we share the gentle laughter of Jesus once we go above the battleground to where to his perspective that looks beyond the devastation
Right.
of the ego thought system and sees it's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the correction, because the real problem was that we took the idea of separation seriously. It didn't happen. There is no separation, but because we took it seriously, we identified with this horrific guilt, and that's what's keeping us in hell, is the clinging to the guilt, the guilt of me, the guilt of the idea of me that really never happened. So yeah, what a relief when we have that shift.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we have to take that first step of, I must be wrong about my conclusion of what the cause of these tears are.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And the questioning not only questions our judgment, but the very foundation of the identity of the self that makes the judgment as a
Hmm.
separate self. Probably not directly all the time, but at some point we realize that if I'm judging as a Bruce or a Susan, or fill in the blanks with your name, whoever's watching or listening to this, it's like I'm getting that, like in paragraph 3, I'm getting just a tiny subset of the facts,
Hmm.
and in my mind's courtroom, I'm not going to make a good decision if I use a limited set of a tiny fragment of what's the big picture is.
Right, right. I really can't, if I'm trying to practice the Course on my own, I can't, I'm not practicing the Course, because, that's the whole problem, is that the idea that there's an on my own, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I definitely, this comes with a built-in teacher, and we need to, part of the process of this is really becoming intimate with that teacher and developing trust in that teacher, and,
Right.
you know, again, resigning over and over as our own teacher, and leaning into that awareness and love.
You mean we
It's
were badly taught, as the Course says?
badly taught.
I was
Right.
also thinking about how the ego takes a tiny little bit of information and makes a big deal out of it, and the Holy Spirit um, takes into account everything and dismisses it as nothing.
It's
It's
just
just
the
it
same
again.
problem.
The two thought systems are just totally opposite,
Same
as usual.
problem, but it's not real.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
right.
Exactly.
Yep, so true. It is not difficult to relinquish judgment, but it is difficult indeed to try to keep it. And it's painful to try to keep it too. That's what really motivates us after a while, practicing this. The teacher of God lays it down happily the instant he recognizes its costs, the pain of that guilt. All of the ugliness he sees about him is the outcome of that projection of guilt. All of the pain he looks upon is its result. all of the loneliness and sense of loss, of passing time and growing hopelessness, of sickening despair and fear of death, all these have come of it. And now he knows that these things need not be. Not one is true, for he has given up their cause. So the belief in their cause, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they, which never were, but the effects of his mistaken choice, have fallen from him. Teacher of God, this step will bring you to peace. Can it be difficult to want but this? Well, yeah, it can be.
It can seem to be, right?
Actually.
In a previous course conversation today, we're talking about the word seem and how many times that appears in a
Yeah.
study group, because there's hundreds of
Yeah. Yeah.
implications that if this just seems to be and it appears to be kind of thing. I was also thinking about how, as we've been reading this wonderful section, how the classroom really has a lot to do with just looking at all the mundane stuff of our everyday lives and
Oh, yeah.
recognizing how often we want to judge, the things that we think are big deals in the bigger world that we think of as the bigger world, and the little world of our own, personal surroundings and those, family members and coworkers and, the people in our lives that we interact with most frequently. And just notice all the things that, just the everyday mundane stuff that we have judgments about, and ask ourselves, am I making a condemnation or an attack through my judgment, my myopic assessment of things, in order to make a dysfunctional dream, real and perpetuate it. Like Ken says, the maladaptive solution to the non-existent problem. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it really is that day in and day out, moment to moment practice that it does begin to collapse the hierarchy of illusions too that the Course talks about, because
Mm-hmm.
you become very familiar with what the Course says, that the minor twinge of annoyance is hides the thought of murder. That's a paraphrasing of the idea, but
Mm-hmm.
really our thoughts are very murderous. We can be enraged over just daily things that happen in our kitchen. I'm
Mm-hmm.
one to tell you that is the case. So,
You mean like the arrangement of things in a dishwasher or refrigerator are not the end of the world?
yeah, particularly lately, it has to do with the way people view sanitizing versus the way I view sanitizing. But yeah, but
All
those
that
are.
stuff, all that stuff. So yeah, all those things are perfect classroom opportunities, aren't they? Just kind of notice when we bent out of shape or upset for the reason we think,
Yep.
instead of recognizing that, well, maybe it's because I chose the wrong teacher. Oh man, what a
Right. Right.
but
But I could.
that's usually the last place we look, right? Yeah.
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 Well, and yeah, that I could be doing this peacefully, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're probably going to still do what we have to do. We have to do certain things in this world, as bodies,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the purpose that we're giving it, and we don't have to be, in conflict all the time. We're choosing that.
Right.
So, and but that's the good news, is that that means we can also choose to to let it go, to ask for help, right? To admit we're wrong and go to the cause, and withdraw our attachment to the effects. So
Yeah. I like the withdrawal idea. That's sort of like when you've mounted a military force and you're in the waiting for the battle to begin, and you realize, wait a minute,
right,
I could withdraw the troops and choose a different history here.
right, you kind of
Yeah.
back away from the dishwasher and do this instead, right?
Well,
It's really
obviously we're still
peacefully.
going to do the everyday mundane things, but we could do it with the different awareness.
I
And
just mean in terms of a timeout, then you
oh
go
well,
back.
yeah, exactly, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
yep, yeah,
Yeah. So how is judgment relinquished with lots of practice and help from our
exactly,
inner teacher, right?
exactly, yeah. And
Humility.
we can afford to be really grateful, as it comments here in this section.
Yes.
It is an opportunity for real gratitude when we recognize that the teacher that does have the answers, that does have all the facts, is within every one of us, just waiting patiently for us to consider the real alternative.
Imagine how bored he is most of the time, because there's nobody to teach. We're just all
I think that might be
in
part of
our own
our
lives.
misjudgment too, that we think that there's boredom there.
I know. But I like to just imagine him like, like,
But
okay.
now relaxed though, that, you know, that one seems to fit, I think. I don't know. That's just my assessment at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Anything else on this? This is again a great one. I think we both agree. This is a lot here to practice. Huh?
Yep. No, I think that's good. We're doing
Okay.
it.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Susan. As always, I enjoy our conversations. You can find Susan's wonderful writings and her blog, as well as her books about A Course in Miracles, on foraysinforgiveness.com. And I will also post this conversation on acimblog.com. And I look forward to the next one. So,
Thank you. Me too.
likewise.